Dr. Zexai pressed his six-fingered hand against the smooth, metal surface buried deep in the red clay of what the local species called Earth. The xenoarchaeologist's breathing apparatus hissed softly as he studied the strange markings carved into the ancient artifact. His team had been surveying this small blue planet for 3 standard cycles, cataloging ruins and geological formations for the Galactic Council's records. "Professor, you need to see this," called his assistant, Kiravel, from across the excavation site. Her voice carried an unusual tremor that made Zexai's dorsal spines tingle with unease. The dig site sat in what humans called the Australian outback, far from their primitive settlements. The council had chosen this remote location specifically to avoid contact with the local inhabitants. Standard protocol required minimal interference with developing civilizations, though this particular species seemed to be advancing unusually fast for such a young race. Zexai carefully made his way across the rocky terrain to where Kiravel knelt beside a massive stone tablet. The artifact was easily twice his height and covered in intricate symbols that seemed to pulse with an inner light when viewed from certain angles. But what made his blood run cold was the familiar script etched along its base. "Is that what I think it is?" he whispered, dropping to his knees beside the tablet. Kiravel nodded slowly, her normally vibrant blue skin now pale with shock. "Old tongue. Definitely predecessor script. But Professor, look at the date stamps." Zexai activated his translation matrix and began scanning the ancient text. The symbols flickered and rearranged themselves in his visual display as the device worked to decode the archaic language. What he read made his heart skip several beats. "This can't be right," he muttered, running the scan again. "The dating puts this artifact at over 4 million standard years old. That's impossible. The geological surveys show this planet only developed complex life forms within the last few 100,000 cycles." His assistant pointed to another section of the tablet. "There's more, Professor. Much more." The translation matrix continued its work, revealing line after line of text in the ancient predecessor language. Zexai had spent his entire career studying fragments of their civilization, but he had never seen such a complete record. The predecessors had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago, leaving behind only scattered ruins and partial inscriptions. Most scholars believed they had transcended to a higher plane of existence or simply died out naturally. As more text became readable, Zexai felt a growing sense of dread. The tablet spoke of something called Project Kethmoran and detailed monitoring stations placed across the planet's surface. References to biological acceleration protocols and stress adaptation sequences filled the ancient record. Kiravel, access the linguistic database. "I need a full translation of this name. Kethmoran." His assistant's fingers flew across her portable console. After several tense moments, she looked up with wide eyes. "Professor, according to the Old Tongue Dictionary, Kethmoran translates to the proving ground or trial world. But there's a secondary meaning that's even more specific." "What is it?" "Crucible of War, place of final testing." Zexai stared at the tablet as the full implications began to sink in. This wasn't just any world. This was a predecessor experimental site. But experiments for what purpose? He activated his communicator and contacted the survey ship orbiting high above the planet's atmosphere. "Captain Tholek, we need immediate deep scans of the entire planetary surface. Look for any structures or artifacts that match predecessor technology signatures." "Understood, Doctor. Beginning scans now." While they waited for results, Zexai and his team continued translating the tablet. The ancient text described monitoring stations positioned at key points around the globe, designed to observe and record the development of life forms on the planet's surface. But this wasn't passive observation. The record spoke of controlled interventions, carefully timed disasters, and deliberate environmental pressures applied to force rapid evolution. "Professor," Captain Tholek's voice crackled through the communicator, "you're not going to believe this. We've found predecessor installations on every continent. Most are buried deep underground, but they're all connected by some kind of energy network that's still partially active." Zexai's worst fears were beginning to materialize. "How many installations?" "Over 300 confirmed sites. Some are massive underground complexes. It looks like this entire planet was one giant research facility." Kiravel had continued working on the translation while he spoke with the ship. Her face had gone completely white and her hands shook as she pointed to a section near the bottom of the tablet. "Professor, This part here describes the purpose of the experiments. They were trying to create the perfect warrior species, something that could survive any threat and adapt to any environment. Zexhai read the passage himself, his translator struggling with some of the more technical terms. The text describes cycles of extinction events, carefully orchestrated to eliminate the weak and strengthen the survivors. Ice ages that lasted for thousands of years. Asteroid impacts timed to create maximum evolutionary pressure. Volcanic eruptions that changed the planet's entire climate. They were using this world as a testing ground, he said quietly. Every major disaster in this planet's history wasn't natural. It was part of their experiment. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message from the Council's main archives on Centris Prime. The data request he had sent earlier was being returned with priority. Classification. Dr. Zexhai, this is Archive Master Gulthon. Your request for information about predecessor project sites has triggered our highest security protocols. I'm transmitting everything we have, but I must warn you. This information has been classified for over 2 million years for good reason. The data packet arrived moments later, and Zexhai quickly scanned through the archived files. What he found made his blood turn to ice. References to Kethmaran appeared in dozens of classified reports, always with warnings about the danger of the experiments conducted there. One file, marked with the highest security clearance, contained a partial record of the project's final phases. They succeeded, he whispered, staring at his display screen in horror. What do you mean? Kiravel asked. The experiments? They worked. The predecessors created their perfect warrior species right here on this planet. He looked up at the clear blue sky above them, knowing that somewhere up there, human spacecraft were beginning to venture out into the galaxy. The species that called this world home had survived every test the predecessors could devise. They had endured ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, and plague cycles that would have wiped out any other known civilization. And now they were starting to explore space. We need to contact the Council immediately, Zexhai said, his voice barely steady. This isn't just an archaeological discovery anymore. This is a threat assessment of the highest order. As he began preparing his emergency report, one final translation caught his eye. A small inscription at the very bottom of the tablet, almost hidden beneath layers of sediment. Should the test subjects achieve spaceflight capabilities, immediate evacuation protocols must be implemented. The proving ground was never meant to be opened. Zexhai looked around at the peaceful landscape surrounding their dig site. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the sound of human aircraft passing overhead. The locals had no idea what their world really was, or what they had been shaped to become. The galaxy was about to discover that Earth's children were not the peaceful explorers they appeared to be. They were the successful graduates of the most terrifying military academy ever created. The emergency session of the Galactic Council's Archaeological Committee convened within 6 standard hours of Dr. Zexhai's initial report. Representatives from 12 different species gathered in the sterile white chambers of Centris Prime, their faces showing varying degrees of concern and disbelief. Archive Master Gulthon stood at the center of the circular chamber, his tentacles nervously adjusting the holographic displays that showed images from the Earth excavation site. The ancient tablet floated in 3-dimensional detail above the conference table, its predecessor script glowing softly in the chamber's artificial light. Colleagues, what we have discovered on the world designated as Earth represents the most significant archaeological find in galactic history. Gulthon began, his voice carrying the weight of countless years spent studying ancient civilizations. But I must warn you all that the implications of this discovery extend far beyond simple historical interest. Commander Velthar of the Hegemony Defense Force leaned forward in his chair, his mechanical eye focusing on the tablet's inscriptions. Archive Master, your preliminary report mentioned something about biological experiments. Please clarify the exact nature of these predecessor activities. Gulthon activated another holographic display, this one showing a timeline of Earth's geological history. Red markers indicated major extinction events, while blue markers showed periods of rapid evolutionary development. The tablet we discovered is part of a comprehensive record-keeping system. The predecessors documented every aspect of their experiments on what they called Kethmaran. According to their records, they seeded the planet with various life forms and then subjected them to controlled stress events designed to accelerate evolution. Dr. Quinara, the Council's leading biologist, studied the timeline with growing alarm. These extinction events, the timing is too perfect to be natural. Look at this pattern. Every major disaster was followed immediately by periods of rapid species development. They were deliberately culling the weak. Precisely, Gulthon confirmed. The predecessors created what they called evolutionary pressure cycles. Ice ages that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, followed by rapid climate changes. Asteroid impacts timed to eliminate specific species while allowing others to thrive. Volcanic activity that altered the planet's atmosphere repeatedly. He manipulated the display to show a more detailed view of the planet's recent history. But the most disturbing aspect is what happened in the final phases of their experiment. According to the records, they achieved something they called convergent evolution, the creation of a single dominant species that incorporated the survival traits of all previous test subjects. Representative Zilthar from the Trade Federation raised one of her forearms. Are you saying that the current inhabitants of Earth are the result of these experiments? Not just the result, Gulthon replied grimly. They are the intended outcome. The humans represent the successful completion of the most extensive military development program in known history. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Commander Velthar was the first to speak. Archive Master, I need access to all available data on human capabilities and behavior patterns. If what you're saying is true, we may be dealing with a species literally designed for warfare. Gulthon nodded and activated a new set of displays showing Earth's current inhabitants. Images of humans engaged in various activities filled the air around the conference table. Scientists working in laboratories, athletes competing in sports, soldiers training for combat. The predecessor records are quite specific about the traits they were trying to develop, he explained. Extreme adaptability to environmental changes, enhanced problem-solving abilities under stress, increased aggression when threatened, and most importantly, an overwhelming drive to survive and reproduce regardless of obstacles. Dr. Quinara pointed to one of the images showing human soldiers. Look at their military organizations. Most species develop warfare as a necessary evil for defense, but humans seem to treat combat as an art form. They have thousands of different fighting styles, weapons designed for every conceivable situation, and tactical doctrines that assume overwhelming odds against them. That's not the most concerning aspect, Commander Velthar added, pulling up his own intelligence files. Our preliminary observations of human space development show they've achieved faster-than-light travel in less than a century after their first powered flight. Most species take millennia to reach that level of technology. Gulthon activated another section of the ancient records. The predecessors documented this tendency as well. They called it accelerated innovation under pressure. Every time they introduced a new challenge, the test subjects didn't just adapt, they created entirely new solutions that surpassed the original problem. The holographic display showed charts and graphs, detailing the progression of various species through the predecessor testing protocols. Most life forms showed steady but slow development over millions of years, but one line on the chart showed exponential growth in the final phases. This represents the development curve of the species that became modern humans, Gulthon explained. Notice how the progression accelerates dramatically in the last 100,000 years. This coincides with what the predecessors called Phase 7 of their experiment. Representative Mordock from the scientific collective leaned closer to examine the data. What exactly was Phase 7? According to the records, it was the final test. The predecessors introduced a series of rapid environmental changes designed to push their test subjects to the absolute limits of survival. Multiple ice ages in quick succession, followed by rapid warming, volcanic winters that blocked out sunlight for years at a time, and finally, deliberate competition between different groups of the same species. You mean they made the humans fight each other? Dr. Quinara asked, not directly, but they created resource scarcity and territorial pressures that forced competition. The records indicate this was the most successful phase of the entire project. The surviving populations developed what the predecessors called tactical cooperation, the ability to work together in large groups while maintaining individual competitive drive. Commander? Velthar stood up abruptly, his expression grim. Archive Master, I need to understand something clearly. Are you telling us that every major historical event on Earth was artificially created to produce better warriors? That appears to be the case, yes. The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives tried to process the magnitude of the revelation. The humans weren't just another developing species. They were the successful graduates of a millions-year military academy designed by the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Gulthon raised his tentacles for silence. There's more. The final entries in the predecessor records indicate they became concerned about the success of their experiment. Concerned how? Zilthar asked. The last readable entry describes what they called parameter exceedance. Their test subjects had not only met all the requirements for the perfect warrior species, they had exceeded them. The humans were showing levels of aggression, adaptability, and innovation that the predecessors hadn't anticipated. He activated one final display showing the last few paragraphs of readable text from the ancient records. The final entry reads, "Subject species has achieved all primary objectives and multiple secondary objectives ahead of schedule. Displaying concerning levels of creative problem-solving and resource acquisition. Recommend immediate project termination and site evacuation. Warning: do not attempt direct contact. Subjects show no recognition of artificial nature of their development and may view creators as potential threats to be eliminated." The silence that followed was deafening. Every representative in the chamber understood the implications. The predecessors, the most advanced civilization in galactic history, had been afraid of their own creation. Dr. Quinara finally broke the silence. "How long ago was this final entry made?" Gulthon checked his translation matrix. "Approximately 50,000 Earth years ago, right around the time human civilization began its most rapid phase of development." Commander Velthar activated his communicator. "I'm calling an emergency session of the full council. Every species needs to know about this immediately." As the representatives began filing out of the chamber, Gulthon stared at the holographic displays still floating above the conference table. Somewhere out there, human ships were beginning to explore the galaxy, their crews completely unaware that they were the end result of the most successful military breeding program ever attempted. The galaxy was about to meet its new apex predators. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and disbelief. Emergency session protocols had been activated for only the third time in galactic history, and the reason for this gathering was spreading through the assembled delegates like wildfire. Council President Thalaris struck the ceremonial gong repeatedly, the deep resonance finally bringing some semblance of order to the proceedings. Her normally calm demeanor showed cracks of strain as she addressed the assembly. "Honored delegates, we have convened this emergency session to address a discovery of unprecedented significance. Archive Master Gulthon will present the findings that have prompted this gathering." Gulthon rose from his position at the central podium, the weight of the galaxy's attention pressing down on his shoulders. The holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing the Earth excavation sites and the translated predecessor records. "Esteemed colleagues, 3 standard days ago, we confirmed the existence of extensive predecessor installations on the world, designated as Earth. What we have discovered there challenges our fundamental understanding of galactic history and presents us with a threat unlike any we have previously encountered." The chamber fell silent as images of the ancient tablets and their translations appeared in the air above every delegate's seat. As the representatives began reading the predecessor records, gasps and exclamations echoed throughout the hall. Ambassador Krixtal from the Hegemony Defense Force stood up abruptly. "Are you seriously claiming that the humans are artificially created warriors? This is impossible." "I'm afraid the evidence is overwhelming," Gulthon replied. "Every aspect of human development follows the patterns described in the predecessor experimental protocols. Their rapid technological advancement, their aggressive territorial expansion, their ability to thrive in hostile environments, all of these traits were deliberately engineered." Defense. Minister Korthan of the Krath Dominion activated his personal display and began running calculations. "Archive Master, I've been studying human historical records since first contact was established. Their entire civilization is built around conflict. They have never experienced a period longer than 50 years without major warfare somewhere on their planet." "More concerning than that," interrupted Dr. Yilveth from the Medical Alliance. is their biological makeup. Humans can survive injuries that would be fatal to most other species. They can adapt to extreme temperatures, low oxygen environments, and high radiation levels. Their immune systems are so aggressive that they can literally poison themselves with their own defensive responses. Representative Zorak from the Mining Consortium had been quietly reviewing the human expansion data. Colleagues, I think we're missing the most important point here. Look at their space development timeline. They went from first flight to interstellar travel in less than a century. The average species takes 3,000 years to achieve what they've done in decades. The chamber erupted in renewed discussion as delegates began sharing their own observations about human behavior and capabilities. Stories of human traders who thrived in environments that killed other species. Human explorers who treated deadly radiation zones as minor inconveniences, and human negotiators who could find solutions to problems that had baffled galactic diplomats for centuries. President Thalaris called for order once again. Archive Master, please continue with your analysis of the predecessor records. Gulthan activated another set of displays showing the experimental timeline. The records indicate that the predecessors subjected their test subjects to over 4 million years of controlled evolutionary pressure. Every major extinction event on Earth was artificially created or enhanced to eliminate weak traits and strengthen survival characteristics, and that's monstrous, whispered Representative Dalthar from the Ethical Council. Perhaps, but it was also highly effective, Commander Velthar added grimly. I've been running wargame simulations using human historical data for the past 2 days. In every scenario where humans face superior numbers or technology, they find ways to turn their disadvantages into strengths. He activated his own tactical displays, showing simulation results from hundreds of different combat scenarios. Look at this pattern. When outnumbered 10-to-1, humans develop guerrilla tactics. When facing superior technology, they create asymmetric warfare strategies. When their supply lines are cut, they learn to live off the land in ways that would be impossible for most species. Dr. Quinara stood up to address the assembly. I've been analyzing human genetic sequences since the Archive Master's initial report. What I found is deeply disturbing. Humans carry genetic markers from over 24 different species that existed on Earth throughout its history. It's as if they're a synthesis of every successful survival trait the planet ever produced. Explain, President Thalaris commanded. Their skeletal structure shows adaptations from predatory species, giving them enhanced speed and agility. Their nervous system includes redundancies found in species that survived multiple extinction events. Their digestive system can process foods that would be toxic to most other life forms. They're not just one species. They're a compilation of the best survival traits from millions of years of evolution. The implications of this revelation rippled through the chamber. If humans were indeed the product of such extensive biological engineering, their seemingly peaceful exploration of space took on a much more sinister tone. Ambassador Zilthar from the Trade Federation accessed her economic databases. Colleagues, I've been tracking human commercial activities since they established trade relations with our outer colonies. Their negotiation tactics are unlike anything we've seen before. They approach every transaction as if it were a military campaign. How so? Asked President Thalaris. They gather intelligence on every party involved, identify weaknesses and strengths, create multiple contingency plans, and always maintain options for rapid withdrawal or escalation. Most species negotiate for mutual benefit. Humans negotiate to win. Secretary Mordock from the Scientific Collective had been reviewing the predecessor experimental data. The records indicate that the final phase of the experiment involved something called distributed conflict resolution. The predecessors deliberately created situations where different human groups had to cooperate against common threats while competing for limited resources. And the result? Commander Velthar asked. They learned to function as a single species when facing external threats but maintain internal competitive pressure to drive continued innovation. It's the perfect military organizational structure, unity against external enemies, internal competition to maintain peak performance. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the situation became clear. Humanity wasn't just another species joining the galactic community. They were the successful product of the most sophisticated military development program in known history, created by beings who had ruled the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. President Thalaris activated the Council's strategic databases. I'm authorizing immediate deep intelligence gathering on all human activities. We need to understand their current capabilities and intentions. With respect, Madam President, interrupted Dr. Zexhai via communication link from Earth. There's something else you need to know. We've discovered additional predecessor installations, and some of them are still active. The chamber's attention focused on the archaeologist's transmission. The monitoring systems the predecessors installed are still functional. They've been observing and recording human development for the past 50,000 years, and according to the automated logs, the final protocols were activated when humans achieved faster-than-light travel. What final protocols? President Thalaris demanded. We're still translating, but it appears to be some kind of graduation ceremony. The humans have completed their training program. The predecessor installations are preparing to release them into the galaxy. A chill ran through the assembled delegates as they realized the implications. The humans weren't just exploring space out of curiosity. They had been programmed, trained, and prepared for galactic expansion by the most advanced civilization in history. Commander Velthar activated his military communicators. I'm placing all hegemony forces on high alert. We need to prepare for the possibility that humanity represents a direct threat to galactic stability. Wait, called out Ambassador Krikstal. Has anyone considered that the humans might not be hostile? Their interactions with our species have been peaceful so far. That's what makes them so dangerous, replied Gulthon quietly. According to the predecessor records, the perfect warrior doesn't start fights. They wait for others to make the first move, then they finish them. As the emergency session continued into the night, one fact became increasingly clear to every delegate present. The galaxy had just discovered that its newest members were not the peaceful explorers they appeared to be. They were the graduates of a 4-million-year program designed to create the ultimate survivors. And now they were looking to the stars. The private chambers beneath the Galactic Council building had not been used in over 3 centuries. Reserved for discussions of the most sensitive nature, these rooms were shielded from all forms of surveillance and communication. Today they hosted representatives from every major power block in the galaxy, all gathered to discuss a single question: what to do about humanity. General Kothmar of the Krath Dominion paced around the circular table, his massive form casting shadows across the dimly lit room. His species had built their reputation on military might, but even they seemed shaken by the revelation about Earth's true nature. The solution is obvious, he growled, his voice echoing off the stone walls. We strike first. Eliminate the threat before it can fully manifest. Absolutely not, countered Philosopher Prime Sectel from the Eternal Assembly. Her normally serene demeanor showed strain as she faced the general. We cannot commit genocide based on fear and speculation. Ambassador Tholek from the Merchant Collective adjusted his trade ledgers nervously. Has anyone considered the economic implications? Human commerce has become integral to 17 different trade networks in just the past 5 years. Their elimination would cause a cascade failure across multiple sectors. Supreme Admiral Velthar leaned forward across the table, his cybernetic implants glowing softly in the chamber's low light. Colleagues, I've spent the last week running every possible military scenario. If the predecessor records are accurate, direct military action against humanity would be catastrophic, regardless of the outcome. Explain, demanded General Kothmar. Their entire evolutionary history has prepared them for exactly this type of threat. Look at their response patterns to every challenge they've faced. When attacked by superior forces, they don't surrender or flee. They adapt, innovate, and find ways to turn their disadvantages into strengths. Velthar activated a portable holographic display showing simulation results. I ran a scenario based on the complete military resources of the Krath Dominion against current human space assets. Even with our overwhelming technological and numerical superiority, the simulations show a 60% chance of human victory within 50 years. That's impossible, Kothmar snarled. The simulations factor in human historical behavior patterns. When faced with extinction-level threats, they don't just fight harder, they innovate exponentially. Every war in their history has resulted in technological leaps that would have taken other species centuries to. Chiefs and Dr. Yin Ara from the Biological Research Institute had been quietly studying genetic samples collected from human colonies. Admiral Velthar is correct. I've been analyzing human adaptation rates, and they're unlike anything we've seen in any other species. When exposed to new environments, their genetic expression changes within a single generation. They're literally evolving in real time. Council Secretary Morgoth pulled up diplomatic files on his personal console. Our intelligence networks have been monitoring human expansion for the past 2 years. They're not behaving like a typical emerging civilization. Every colony ship they send out includes military personnel, scientists, engineers, and what they call specialists. Individuals with skill sets, designed for rapid terraforming and defensive installations. They're not exploring, realized Ambassador Zilthar from the Trade Federation. They're establishing fortified positions. Philosopher Prime Sectel raised one of her forearms for attention. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. The humans may be products of predecessor engineering, but they've shown no hostile intent toward other species. Could we not attempt peaceful coexistence? General Kothmar slammed his massive fist on the table. Peaceful coexistence with a species designed to conquer the galaxy? You might as well suggest peaceful coexistence with a supernova. The general has a point, admitted Supreme Admiral Velthar. But direct military action isn't viable. I propose we consider containment strategies instead. What kind of containment? Asked Ambassador Tholek. Economic isolation, technological restrictions, diplomatic quarantine. We could limit their access to advanced technologies and restrict their expansion into key strategic systems. Dr. Quinara from the Medical Alliance had been reviewing psychological profiles of human negotiators. That approach has its own risks. Human historical data shows they respond poorly to restrictions on their movement or development. Every attempt to contain them throughout their history has resulted in rapid innovation and aggressive expansion. Then what do you suggest? Demanded Kothmar. Controlled integration, she replied quietly. We bring them into the galactic community under carefully managed conditions. Give them the illusion of freedom while subtly directing their development. Council Secretary Morgoth looked skeptical. You want to manipulate a species that was created by the most advanced civilization in galactic history specifically to be unmanipulable? It's better than the alternatives. The debate continued for hours as various factions proposed increasingly desperate solutions. Some suggested using humanity's own competitive nature against them by creating artificial conflicts to keep them focused on internal struggles. Others proposed technological sabotage to slow their development. A few extreme voices even suggested biological warfare, though this was quickly dismissed as both morally unacceptable and practically ineffective, given human adaptation rates. Archive Master Gulthon entered the chamber carrying a data tablet with urgent markings. Forgive the interruption, but we've received an update from Dr. Zexai on Earth. The situation has become more complicated. How? Asked Velthar. The humans have discovered our archaeological sites. Silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. If humanity knew about the predecessor installations on their world, they would soon understand the true nature of their own development. Details, commanded General Kothmar. Gulthon activated the data tablet's display function. Dr. Zexai reports that human scientists have found 3 of the major installation sites. They're treating them as archaeological discoveries, but their investigation methods are far more sophisticated than we anticipated. They're learning how to read predecessor script. That's impossible, protested Dr. Yanara. Predecessor script requires specialized translation matrices that took us centuries to develop. Apparently not for humans. They've decoded the basic grammatical structure in less than a week. Dr. Zexai estimates they'll have full translation capabilities within months. Ambassador Zilthar leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. Once they understand what was done to them, how do you think they'll react? Based on their historical patterns, replied Supreme Admiral Velthar, they'll view it as a challenge to overcome. The knowledge that they were created to be the galaxy's apex predators won't frighten them. It will validate their expansion into space. General Kothmar stood up abruptly. That settles it. We have to act before they fully understand their nature. And do what exactly? Challenged philosopher Prime Sectel. We've already established that military action is likely to fail. Economic containment will only accelerate their development. Diplomatic isolation will be viewed as a threat to be eliminated. Council Secretary Morgoth had been reviewing the latest intelligence reports. There's another factor we haven't considered. The humans aren't expanding randomly. Their colony selections follow specific patterns that suggest they're preparing for something. Preparing for what? Asked Dr. Quinara, unknown. But every system they've selected for colonization has strategic value for long-range operations. Deep space refueling stations, asteroid mining facilities, defensive installations covering major trade routes. They're building infrastructure for large-scale military operations. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the possibility that humanity was already preparing for galactic conquest. The peaceful explorers and traders they had welcomed into the galactic community might already be positioning themselves for war. Supreme Admiral Velthar activated his secure communicators. I'm authorizing covert surveillance of all human operations. We need to know their true intentions before making any decisions. What if their intentions are exactly what we fear? Asked Ambassador Tholek. Then we'll face the same choice our predecessors did, replied Gulthon quietly. Fight them, flee from them, or hope they decide we're worth keeping alive. General Kothmar moved toward the chamber's exit. I'm returning to the Dominion to prepare our defense forces. Whatever we decide to do about humanity, we need to be ready for the possibility that they'll decide to do something about us first. As the various representatives began filing out of the chamber, each returning to their respective governments with news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, one fact became increasingly clear to all involved. The galaxy had spent millions of years believing it was ruled by wisdom, diplomacy, and careful balance between competing interests, but the return of the predecessor's final creation was about to teach them that in the end, the universe still belonged to those with the will and ability to take it, and humanity had been specifically designed to have both. Dr. Zexhai stood before the massive predecessor installation, buried beneath what humans called the Sahara Desert. The underground complex stretched for kilometers in every direction, its ancient corridors humming with energy that had been dormant for millennia. But 3 days ago, everything had changed. The moment human scientists had entered the facility, the installation had awakened. Professor, you need to see this immediately, called Dr. Sarah Chen, the human archaeologist leading the joint research team. Her voice echoed through the vast chamber as she stood before a crystalline data core that pulsed with soft blue light. Zexhai hurried across the chamber, his breathing apparatus working harder than usual in the thin atmosphere. The humans seemed unaffected by the environmental challenges that made this site difficult for most alien species to explore. Another reminder of their engineered nature. What have you found, Dr. Chen? The human scientist gestured toward the data core, which had begun displaying holographic text in multiple languages, including English, which should have been impossible for predecessor technology to know. It's been teaching itself our language. This entire facility is some kind of advanced artificial intelligence, and it wants to communicate with us. Before Zexhai could respond, the crystalline core pulsed brighter, and a holographic figure materialized before them. The image was vaguely humanoid but clearly artificial, its features shifting and adapting as it spoke. Greetings, children of Kethmaran. I am the final custodian of Project Genesis. You have achieved the parameters necessary to receive this message. Dr. Chen stepped forward, showing no fear despite facing technology that was older than her entire species. What is Project Genesis? What is this place? This facility and others like it across your world were created to monitor and guide the development of the ultimate survivor species. You are that species. You are our greatest success and our greatest failure. Zexhai felt his blood run cold as the implications of those words sank in. The AI was confirming everything they had discovered in the ancient records, but there was something in its tone that suggested the story was far from complete. Failure? Dr. Chen asked. What do you mean, failure? The holographic figure gestured, and the chamber around them filled with images of Earth's history. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinctions played out in accelerated time around them. We sought to create the perfect adaptive species, beings capable of surviving any threat, overcoming any obstacle, thriving in any environment. In this, we succeeded beyond our wildest hopes, but we failed to anticipate what such a species would become when faced with no external threats to overcome. More images appeared, showing human civilization developing at an unprecedented rate, cities rising and falling, technologies advancing in great leaps, weapons growing ever more sophisticated. When the external pressures ended, you did not become peaceful. You created your own pressures. You turned your adaptive capabilities inward, competing with your own kind in ways that drove innovation beyond anything we had imagined possible. Dr. Chen exchanged glances with her human colleagues, then looked back at the AI. Are you saying we exceeded your expectations? You shattered them. Within 50,000 years of our final intervention, you had developed technologies that took us millions of years to create. Your capacity for rapid adaptation had become so refined that you were evolving solutions to problems that hadn't even occurred to us. The holographic display changed to show the final days of predecessor civilization. Great ships launching from planets across the galaxy, entire populations evacuating their homeworlds in apparent panic. We realized we had created something beyond our ability to control or predict. A species that would not just survive in the galaxy, it would remake the galaxy in its image. And so we made the decision to leave. Zexai found his voice despite his shock. You fled? The predecessors abandoned the galaxy because of humanity. Not fled, evacuated. There is a difference. We left detailed records and monitoring systems because we knew that one day, you would reach the stars. We needed the galaxy to understand what was coming. Dr. Chen crossed her arms, displaying the confrontational body language that Zexai had learned to recognize in humans. And what exactly is coming? The natural conclusion of 4 million years of evolutionary pressure, designed to create the ultimate survivors. You will spread across the galaxy not because you are conquerors, but because expansion and adaptation are fundamental to your nature. You cannot stop yourselves from growing, changing, and overcoming obstacles any more than you can stop breathing. The AI gestured again, and new images appeared showing theoretical futures. Human ships spreading across the galaxy. Human colonies adapting to environments that would kill other species. Human technology advancing at exponential rates. But here is what your galactic neighbors do not understand. You are not their enemies. You are their evolutionary pressure. You will force them to adapt, to grow, to become more than they currently are. Some will rise to meet the challenge and become stronger. Others will not. That's not very comforting, Dr. Chen observed dryly. It is not meant to be comforting. It is meant to be truth. You are the catalyst that will drive the next phase of galactic evolution. Whether that evolution takes the form of cooperation or competition will depend largely on how the current galactic community chooses to respond to your emergence. Zexai stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. Why are you telling us this? Why reveal the truth now? Because the monitoring phase is complete. You have achieved all primary objectives and are beginning to exceed our original design parameters. It is time for you to understand what you are and what you were meant to become. The holographic figure began to fade, but its voice remained clear. The galaxy you are entering is stagnant. Billions of beings living the same lives their ancestors lived millions of years ago. You will change that. You will force growth, adaptation, innovation. You will be the pressure that creates diamonds from carbon. And if other species try to stop us, asked Dr. Chen, then they will learn why we designed you to be unstoppable. The AI disappeared, leaving the chamber in sudden silence. The data core's light dimmed to a soft glow, and text began appearing in the air. Coordinates for installations across the galaxy, technical specifications for technologies beyond current understanding, and detailed analyses of every major alien civilization. Dr. Chen turned to Zexai, her expression unreadable. I think we need to have a very long conversation with your Galactic Council. Meanwhile, in the council chambers on Centris Prime, alarms were sounding across every major government installation in the galaxy. Human ships had begun moving from their established colonies, not toward new worlds for exploration, but toward the major population centers of galactic civilization. President Thal Eris stood before the emergency assembly, her voice barely steady as she read the reports. 27 human fleets have changed course simultaneously. They're approaching the core systems of every major species in the galaxy. Estimated arrival time, 36 standard hours. General Kothmar activated his battle fleet communications. This is it. They're making their move. Wait, called out Supreme Admiral Velthar, studying his tactical displays. Look at their formations. Those aren't attack patterns. They're diplomatic escort formations. Before anyone could respond, communications arrays across the chamber activated simultaneously. The face of Dr. Sarah Chen appeared on every screen, her image broadcast from the Sahara installation. Leaders of the Galactic Council, This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the Human Archaeological Survey. I am speaking to you from a predecessor installation on Earth, where we have just learned some very interesting things about galactic history. President Thalera stepped forward. Dr. Chen, your fleets are approaching our core systems. Please explain your intentions. Our intentions are the same as they've always been: peaceful contact and cooperation. But we think it's time for some honest conversations about who we are and where we're all going from here. Dr. Chen gestured, and the holographic figure of the predecessor AI appeared on the council's screens. This is the custodian of Project Genesis. It has some things to tell you about why your ancestors really left the galaxy and what they expected would happen when we finally reached the stars. As the AI began its explanation to the assembled representatives, the same speech that had shaken the human researchers in the Sahara installation, a new understanding began to dawn across the galaxy. The humans weren't invaders or conquerors. They were the final exam that the predecessors had left for galactic civilization. The test was simple: adapt and grow stronger, or be left behind by a species designed to never stop evolving. In the human colonies across space, children played games that looked like preparation for war, but were actually genetic memories of the most comprehensive survival training program ever implemented. Their laughter echoed across communication arrays, carrying with it the sound of a species that had been forged in the crucible of extinction and emerged as something entirely new. The galaxy was about to discover whether it was ready to grow up,